The second wolf in sheep's clothing I want us to talk about is King Saul. Now, initially, if I say wolf in sheep's clothing, it doesn't sound like he was doing anything. He's known for his disobedience, and it seems like he is pretty straightforward. He was a man that was obeying God before, and then the next thing, he started to disobey God. But let me show you a few things that was taking place with King Saul. He's quite an interesting character for me, because you get to see the development of Saul's character from the man he was, from the man who was anointed by God, was called to do this, wonderful work, to all of a sudden becoming this obsessed individual who's been tormented. So, King Saul, one of the things that led him to his disobedience is actually shown in 1 Samuel chapter 13 from verse 8 to 10. And I'll just see if I can quickly go there. It's quite windy but I'll see if I can quickly take myself to First Samuel. Sorry for the movement of the camera. All right, First Samuel chapter 13, verse 8 to 9, and it says, "And he tarried 7 days, according to the set time that Samuel had appointed. But Samuel came not to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. And Saul said, Bring hither a burnt offering to me, and peace offerings. And he offered the burnt offering. And it came to pass that as soon as he had made an end of offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came, and Saul went out to meet him, that he might salute him. And Samuel said, What have you done? And Saul said, Because I saw that the people were scattered from me, and that you came not within the days you appointed, and that the Philistines gathered themselves together at Michmash. Therefore I said, The Philistines will come down now upon us, or upon me, to Gilgal, and I have not made supplication to the Lord. So I forced myself, therefore, and offered a burnt offering." So, in other words, he was supposed to wait for Samuel to come and do an offering in the midst of a battle. And he became impatient, and he did the offering himself, where it's actually supposed to be the priest or who's supposed to be doing the offering. So one of the things that I noted there was that King Saul cared more about himself. He cared more about people and what they thought of him. He cared more about people and what they thought of him. He had a certain fear of what people would say, of what people would think of him. And that is actually one of the reasons why the wolf has to put on the sheep's clothing, because they are supposed to appear a certain way. They are supposed to appear as good. They are supposed to appear as strong. They're supposed to appear as whatever it is that they want to appear as, right? And so he cared more about what people thought about him. He cared more about what people were going to say. And another thing is, he was a very fearful man. He was actually he feared the Philistines. He feared the opposition. So, in other words, he feared men more than he feared God, because he was quick to, I wouldn't say he was quick, but between the fear of man and between the fear of God, he kind of chose to fear man. Because instead of waiting for Samuel to come and do what the Lord had instructed him to do, he chose to do his own thing. and he chose to do things that would be agreeable to men, all because he feared men. And so that is why he had to put on the wolves have to put on this facade, because they have to appear a certain way. They have to appear strong. They have to appear you know like they know what they're doing, even if they don't know what they're doing. In this instance, Saul really did not know what he was doing, because the consequences of what he did were very dire and actually robbed him of the kingdom. And so it also showed where his loyalty lied. His loyalty did not lie with God, it actually lied with men. Or can I say it lied with self? Because even with man, he was only wanting the men to be there, as a backup to protect him. So here, this is where we get to see the difference between reputation and integrity. Reputation and integrity. Are you authentic or are you false? If you are false, then you are going to most likely care more about your reputation than your integrity. Reputation is when a person is known for certain things. A person is known for a certain persona, or a person is known for certain characteristics, or you're known for a skill, you're known for whatever it is that you're known for. That's reputation, sorry. Whatever people know you for, that is reputation. But integrity now it's more deeper than that. It's You might be have a reputation of being a good person, but at the same time you can also have that integrity. Basically, your integrity is what you do behind closed doors, what you do when no one is looking at you, what you do when no one is there. Who are you behind closed doors and who are you in front of people? That is where your integrity is tested. So people who have reputations don't necessarily always have integrity, but those who have integrity can have a reputation, but also be mindful that like I've said to you, there are wolves in sheep's clothing. Anytime they see somebody who is good and they try to imitate them, they can or they don't get their way with that person, they can smear campaign a person, and that person who's good can end up having a reputation that is false, that is bad, and people can have the name of a person in their mouths, not knowing that behind closed doors that person is actually good. They might appear a certain way, they might appear a certain way in which might be fueling whatever rumors are going around, but behind closed doors, between them and God, everything is good. Between them and God, they are precious, all because of their integrity. Sorry for that. I was just talking about reputation and integrity. And so I was just saying that your reputation is just what people know you by. So you cannot always rely on what people know about certain people. Reputations can go around and they can be very false, and it can be, something that happened maybe many years ago. And as I said, it can be true, it can be false, but you don't know the state of the person they are now. And the best way to find out about a person is to go before the Lord, to find out whether they have integrity. Reputations are not things that you would want to go by if you want to find out about people. It is good to ask, people around for a person's reputation, but the the best being to go and seek for confirmation about a person and their character is God Himself. God is the one who reveals the hearts of men. He knows what is in the hearts of a person. He knows what is the thoughts of a person. He knows what is going on in the mind of a person. So it is always best to find out from the source rather than to find out um, from other people, because people also have their own agendas, and some people might be good but are misinformed, and they're just carrying the same information that they were told by people who had bad intentions. So it is just so much more better to go to the source, the one who created that the person you are seeking to find out about their integrity. So this is what led to Saul being disobedient to God so many times. This is just one of the times that he disobeyed God. From there, it was almost downhill. He disobeyed God in so many ways. And so he was now mostly depending on his understanding. He was now leading people astray. Like what I said, he wanted to continue to lead the children of Israel, but he knew that the kingdom had now been taken out of his hands because Samuel told him. So when Samuel told him that the kingdom is now, the consequences of your actions have led to the kingdom being taken out of your hands, and that someone else is going to come to replace you, instead of repenting, instead of going before the Lord and asking the Lord for forgiveness and seeking for another way that the Lord can bless him, he decided, I'm going to continue, first of all, to lead the people of Israel. I'm going to continue to do what I think is right. And as I said, it went downhill from there. He continued in his disobedience. He did not, seek for God's mercies. And because he didn't seek for God's mercies, even though he tried to go to the Lord to ask for direction, God was not answering him because he did not seek for repentance. He did not seek for God's mercies concerning, what he had done. Rather, he had only concentrated on Samuel because he thought Samuel was the one who was going to give him what he needed. And yet Samuel was just a vessel, like I was speaking earlier on, that the ministers of God are just vessels. They're just following their master's orders. And so Saul continued in his disobedience to God and did not repent for his ways. He went on to depend on his understanding, and he led the people of Israel astray. In what sense? He made some really, really impulsive decisions. I think that's one of the characteristics I was speaking to you earlier on, that they make some really bad decisions, some really irrational decisions, because they don't have the guidance, they don't seek for the guidance of God. It's all about themselves. So the children of Israel were now suffering because of Saul's disobedience. And you can see part of that story in 1 Samuel chapter 14, when he was leading the Israelites in battle. Again, he tried to do things himself, plan things himself, because the Lord was no longer with him in that sense because of his disobedience and his pride. And we see that his decisions were leading, were sort of now causing them to, you know, to be faint at a time when they're supposed to be strong, leading the army to be at a disadvantage where where they had a big advantage. So all because of impulsive decisions. He made the whole army to fast at a time when they were supposed to be strong and they were supposed to be eating and strong, ready to battle the entire Philistine army. But because he didn't have the leading and the guidance of God, he made them fast at a time when he was not supposed to fast, and he made them to eat at a time when they were not meant to eat. There was a lot of chaos that happened, and they were now even disobeying God's commandments about food because they were that hungry. They were starting to eat, you know, um, cattle with blood in it, and all because they were that hungry and because Saul wasn't leading them well. So it led to a lot of things. But in other words, now when Saul becomes more and more of a wolf. Sorry for the wind, it's really windy out here. But I just need to get this word out. So we see that in 1 Samuel, David comes into the scene. And David comes and slaughters Goliath. And Saul falls in love with David, not knowing that David was the replacement. And so once he finds out that David is a replacement, he becomes obsessively jealous of David. And that's another thing about wolves. They really, really, like I said, they don't want anything or anyone to outshine them. And so because was said to be, because David was said to be better than him by not only Samuel, but also the women who were singing songs of praise, declaring that David had done more than Saul. It made Saul to be obsessively jealous of David. And so as time goes on, we see this cat and mouse game. Sorry about the noise. This cat and mouse game between Saul and King Saul and David, which David is fleeing for his life and King Saul is coming after him constantly. Now, to the people around him, he was he was telling people that David was rebellious, that David did not follow the king's orders, and that he has brought in certain people together so that they can overthrow him. And so that narrative, becomes becomes David's narrative everywhere he goes. In other words, those who were not with God really believed that David was a rebellious person. We see that in the story of is it Abigail? Abigail. We see that Abigail's husband had a certain view of David, and David, when he came to him, can I say he came to his flock, he had looked after, Abigail's husband's flock, and, him and his man, and they were just, expecting that because they had looked after the flock, they'd be given a little reward in return, only to be insulted that they were a rebellious people and that they were rebelling against the king. So there's a narrative that was now going around about David, all because of King Saul's jealousy. And because of that, David now had to hide in rocks and mountains and all all manner of places just to run away from King Saul's, rage, and to run away from people that would also sell him out because of the narrative that they had, the false narrative they had of David. And that is where I was talking about reputation over integrity, because in all this, David kept his integrity before God. He was good. He was doing good. He was going around doing good despite the fact that King Saul was running after him and pursuing after his life. He still kept doing good, yet people were perceiving him as a bad man, as a rebellious man, that he was rebelling against his leaders, he's rebelling against the king, he wants to overthrow the king, and all those rumors. But yet, before God, David was clean. And like Haman, he came up against, not just David, but all that were with David. He came up against, they were the priests of Nob, who actually did not know what was taking place, but just the idea that he thought, just the idea that the priest helped David, despite not knowing, made Saul to be jealous and angry. And he killed all the priests of Nob just because of David. So just like Haman wanted to destroy the Jews because of Mordecai, King Saul was now coming after anybody and everybody who declared that they were with David, or that who declared that David was good, or who saw another, the true nature of David and believed that David was innocent. Even his own son, Nathan, it got to a point where he even did not care what would happen to Nathan in the wars that they were fighting, all because he knew that Nathan had a great friendship with David. He loved David as a good friend, but because of that connection, he was so angry and he was so jealous, and he was even against his own son. But because he could not exactly kill his own son, he kept him around. But you can tell throughout that he was looking for even reasons to kill his own son. There was a time when Jonathan was not there when he declared the fast. And when Jonathan came and had honey, he now wanted to kill Jonathan for tasting honey, all because he had caused a certain consequence to come upon them for breaking the fast. Yet Jonathan was not there to hear the instructions, and so he did not mind killing his own son. But because of the men, like I said, he had a fear of the men, and because of the men around him, that was the only reason why Jonathan was alive. And again, the king neglected his duties to run after David. So instead of looking to the affairs of the kingdom and watching over the kingdom, he was busy out there going into the wilderness, going into the desert places to look for David with his army, and leaving the kingdom vulnerable to attacks. And it got to a point where he was almost close to catching David, but then the Lord made the Philistines to come up against Israel again, and a messenger had to come running to tell Saul that he needs to go back to his post. He needs to go back and fight for the Israelites because the Philistines have come. But whereas if he had been there watching over the kingdom, he would have seen them a mile away before they had even come. But because he was so busy in his obsessive, jealous rage against David, he left his duties, he left his position, and he left the kingdom vulnerable. So in other words, the kingdom didn't necessarily have a king. The king was busy in his own agenda, in his own was busy looking to his own needs and not looking to the kingdom's needs, which also justifies why God had to choose David to become king. Because despite everything that David went through, he still continued to look after his men. Despite being rejected by the Israelites, he still looked out for them. He even saved cities, even in the midst of being pursued by King Saul. He saved a city from enemies, all because King Saul was not on his post and was not doing his duties. Another thing was he was leading people astray. By pursuing after an anointed, he was making also his army to pursue an anointed. And you know that, coming after an anointed was not, it brought a lot of consequences with God. David understood that because he said, I'm not going to raise my hand against the anointed of God. He had the opportunity to kill King Saul at some point when Saul was relieving himself in one of the caves. But he decided, I am not going to raise my hand against the king because he is anointed. And it showed the difference between him and King Saul, and even King Saul himself. He had to confess and say, yes, you have a good heart and I don't. You have a good heart and I don't, and you are deserving of this kingship. But despite that confession, he still continued on with his obsessive rage. So that was one of the things I wanted to say, that he's a wolf in sheep's clothing. He's being seen as one way, with the king, by the rest of the kingdom, and yet when he was alone with David, he confessed that truly David was a good man and that truly he was deserving of kingship.